Okay, here we go. Good afternoon. All right, let's let everybody in before we get started. Almost everybody here. Let's give it another minute or two. We're still missing a few people. I'm going to start in a moment, even knowing we're going to get interrupted a little bit. I'm just going to stall for a minute. That's what I'm going to do. 8, 12, 16, 17. We're missing a good 5 people. All right, so it goes. Good afternoon, everybody. And I do hope everybody's holding up at the end of the semester. It's just so exhausting. You guys are actually looking pretty good. But since I've been around this block so often, I'm going to read between the lines and assume that everyone's, you know, suitably tired. But, the good news is we're closing in on it. Um, see, my internet is warning me that it's a bit unstable. Are you guys hearing me okay? Yeah? All
We
right.
can hear you.
All right. So look, I want to switch right to the handout as I usually do at the beginning, make sure that dates and any kind of details are in place. And then I want to get started with today's lesson. So let me switch into screen sharing. And let's get a look at today's handout. All right. So I updated Blackboard, but I think that was the last, in fact, it was last Monday. It was last time I saw you. I've not done any updating since. So if you have looked at Blackboard since, uh, last Monday, there's really been no changes. On the 30th of November was the last time I checked. So I imagine some of you put in revised work, um, and I will check that revisions folder. Other people put work in the late folder. Late is always better than never. And I will definitely be looking at as soon as I can get those grades up and running. So I want to say to you guys about the dates that we have left. So today being December 7th, we have 2 dates left and that's it. So we have next week, the 14th and the 21st. And that's the wrap up. So I want to tell you what you could expect, generally, really over the last couple of weeks. So today we're going to do a kind of casual preliminary critique of draft one. And everyone should take a deep breath because I know it's just the first digital draft and there's likely to be a lot of changes. My goal is in no way judgment. Hang on a second. Let those people in. So again, my goal is not to judge anybody. It's to let people know if I could foresee an issue. As you may already know, I have a section that's moved ahead because of the calendar. The holiday calendar. You both get equal numbers of total classes, but I get to peek at them to have an idea where we're going. So, for example, I had one student working on the reimagined cities project, did a beautiful illustration. It felt very professional to me and fun to look at, but it just missed elements that satisfied the problem. I hate when people do this, but I'm doing it anyway. The problem, the challenge is probably better. The challenge of reimagining a specific place. So her work was great, and it looked like Surf Town. She was thinking Hawaii, but Hawaii's not a city, so she didn't even choose. And even if I was going to allow a town, or something, or even an island, there was that. It was like she was referencing a country, and frankly, it looked like any kind of country that has surfing. So I said to her, "Look, this is beautiful. Really, very professional technically, but it didn't meet the requirements. We talked about how she could add to it, how could she alter it so that it was more specific to the topic. So I'd like everybody to hear me out on this for a minute. When you're out of school, you're all going to be in different art fields because you're not heading into the same majors, right? But one thing that most of you are going to deal with is an art director or a client. And the client says, I need this for this purpose. So the art director says, we need this for this purpose. And you come close and do something gorgeous, like, hey, you gave me the Mona Lisa. That's amazing. Except for I asked for a landscape. They'd be like, Leonardo, out of here. Sorry. You know what I mean? Really. So one has to be sure that you're applying your work to the topic. That's commercial art. That's what it is. So today I'm going to be helpful in a very kind of warm way. At least I'll do my best. If anything's just too undercooked to talk about, I'll be frank and brief so I don't torture that person. But if I say little, it's probably because there's little to talk about, right? So my goal today is just to make sure you guys are on the right track. We had a great semester so far. I expect we're going to end it very well, but that's the goal. So if you've not already put your work in the folder, and I did get a peek at it, it's a lot of work in here. So I think you all have already done it. But if you haven't, right, I just want to point out this is the name of your Illustrator file. If you had to give me a package, give me the same name but without .ai. That means it's an Illustrator file, not a folder. So if you gave me a package, that's a folder. Name it this way. So either Illustrator file or a package, and you drop it into your section's drive. That's this one. Sorry that these are in opposite order here, but your section 101 clearly. So just drop it in there if you haven't while I'm talking. Guys, while we're on this particular angle on the subject, I want to say something about the final, when it's actually due. So it isn't going to be due for 2 weeks. But at that point, I would just delete all the photos. At that point, if you brought photos in, because a few of you did, a few of you used a certain amount of file menu place and did some tracing. Others just looked at photos or others just thought about them. But if your photos are actually placed in layers, by the time the project's done, delete them. The project's an illustration project, right? And I have no need for the photos at that point. And this way you don't have to worry about file size or packaging stuff for me. You'll just give me an Illustrator file with the deleted photos. That would be for the very last week. Right? Does that make sense? Does anybody have any questions about it? Let's be frank with each other as a bunch of artists. When you get hired to do an illustration, whoever hired you could care less how you made it. So I'm the teacher, so now and then I want to see those photos, but not on a final project. Not one that I'm going to grade immediately because there's no time for revisions. So just chuck the photos, at that stage. All right, there's a couple more things that I want to say. So give me a moment or two. Let me get back to my own handout. All right, so let's see. All right, 2 classes left. I do want to say a little bit about what you can expect next week on the 14th. So next week's going to be an assisted lab, right? And that basically means you're going to work while I'm here so that you have a sudden question or a wish. Gee, I always wanted to do this. Can I do it? I'll be there to do it. Now I'm deciding over the next few days whether you're all going to make appointments with me, and we'll talk individually for 5 minutes each, or whether I'm going to do it more casually. Just say everybody work. In the meantime, I'm going to call on you one by one and get a peek, So I'm trying to weigh out the pros and cons. There are pros and cons for both. But in any case, next week's an assisted lab. You should expect to be working during the class. You should also expect to spend a couple of minutes talking to me about the final project. Does anybody have any questions about next week? I'll try to answer them. Right?
About what part in the project do you think it's smart to be at? Like, what do you want to see by next week?
That's a good question. So, my usual answer is bring it really close to finished, close to finished, but you're all very busy. I got to talk to a few of you separately last week, and the minimum course load, sorry, my internet keeps complaining. I really hope it's not interfering with you hearing me, but the people I talked to, the person taking the least number of classes was taking 6, and a couple people that were there were taking 7. So I know you guys are working hard. I don't really expect anyone to have it finished by next week. You have 2 whole weeks. So Juliana, my answer is sort of a little gray. It's like get real close to finish so that you could talk to me about what's really important instead of questions you should be beyond. Like I get some questions like, which technique should I use? Psh, you're the artist, you know, but I want to get to a stage where I could say, oh, this is beautiful. This is working. And you could tell me, oh, yeah, I'm still working on that. Or really, why? Why is that not working? So, short answer, get it close. So, I can't give you anything more specific. And guys, like I said, I'll decide by next week whether we're going to do this with breakout rooms. I might have everyone work and then take you one by one into a breakout room to talk to you separately. There's any number, in the classroom, we work and I have you help each other and I walk from seat to seat. And when I come over, I set a timer. We have 5 minutes. I go to the next person, right? So I'm trying to figure out what's best in this strange COVID time. All right. So that's that. And again, please, guys, interrupt me with questions. Juliana's a handy spokesperson. She often asks things other people are thinking, but not everything. So Christina kicks in. I know a few of you kick in now and then with questions. Feel free. I'm not scary. At least I don't think so. All right, let me move this over. Listen, about revisions, and really, a few of you have taken me up on it, and just about everybody's improved their work and their grade. Um, that's it for revisions. You know what I mean? I'm not going to take any after the last 2 weeks. So you've got 2 weeks for revisions left. Please time yourself wisely. I want to say to a couple of you that already reached out to me and said that, how would I revise a given project? I wrote back at least one of you today in an email. I can answer when there's an answer. If the work is just wildly undercooked, it's just like nowhere near the standard, I'll just write back. It's just say, look, you looked at all the work. I don't know what to say at this late date about bringing stuff up. It's like you got a B, you want to know how to make it an A, I could answer it. But if the work's just really undercooked, barely passing, I'll let the person know in a polite way. Look, I need to say something clearly, and I hope you could tell this comes from the heart. Some of you guys are going to be amazing at one side of this and really not very good at another side of this. And that's okay. That's life. That's going to help you figure out what you do for your work. No one's going to be great at all of it. So if your one project's a low grade, you honestly cannot figure out how to improve it. Let it go. That's life. Do your best on the next project. So right now, what I'm really hoping is everyone does their best on this project. Right? That's really what my thoughts are on. And if you ask me any specific questions about other projects, I've answered you in an email, right? And that's where we stand, So, all right, let me move this over. So check your email. I emailed some of you today. All right. Tutoring, YouTube, here's your links. All right. So can I assume that everybody put some kind of file in there in the Google Drive today? So again, I'm going to go jump into there right now. If by any chance you're still a little behind that curve, please drop your stuff in now. Right here, your links. This is your link right here, and make sure it has the proper name. That's always helpful. I'm taking attendance, by the way, right now. There we go. I do want to mention one last thing, though. I'm going to do these fast, right? My goal is to get to the point, if there's a point. If there's not enough there for me to actually offer you anything substantial, I'm going to say that. This is a very preliminary critique, right? These are, very light. All right. I actually have it here. I'm just going to refresh it. So, this one is super duper light for digital draft, but it's got the concepts, which I appreciate. It's got the basic design too. Let me try to zoom out a little bit. Right. So it's a city. I'm such a New Yorker. I assume every drawing of a city is New York. This reminds me of the Chrysler Building. And here we've got an angry rodent picking up a cab. So, you know what I want to say to Samantha is I think the design's getting off the ground. I'm hoping that your shapes are all closed, so it's going to be easy for you to apply color later. But a couple things that I want to say to you is this: we want color. If you're going to use line, either in any important way, right, you should consider the stuff we learned last week about line. Because usually a 1 point black line that has no weight or no variation or no brush definition to feel like a brush, it's usually boring. It looks like it came right out of the software. First, default. By the way, default things are always bad. Use the type tool, you got the default font, never use it. It's the first font out of the bag. Everybody's using the same font. First color, first kind of line. Those are always the ones that are going to be overused. So this one here is giving me some concept. So Samantha, I'm going to ask you to include the name of the city. You want to do that in some interesting way, hopefully. And we'll see about the color in the line next week. Um, you know, she's basically saying, in this case, Samantha, are you there? I want to ask you
Yeah.
a quick question. So I want to ask you something. So I see the rat is picking up the car, so it's a very reimagined city, thankfully. But I also noticed there's a cricket or grasshopper on one of the skyscrapers. So can you just tell me quickly, what's the theme in terms of your reimagining?
So basically, the theme is rats and roaches taking over New York City.
Got it. And I guess in a sense, you got to look closer at some roaches because that
Yeah.
looks exactly like a grasshopper. It's actually very appealing. So I'd just swap that insect out, get some gross photos of roaches, and please give me a lot. I think it's a great idea, and I
Yeah.
feel really bad for any of you who are living in a place that's got roaches lifting up your cars or even just scuttling across the kitchen floor. I like this idea a lot. So just push it hard. Make sure that the reason I asked was, oh, what? Maybe she's saying the woods are encroaching on the city, and that's why there's this cricket looking thing. That's why I asked. So I would stick with urban vermin.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So I got to tell you, I'm very interested in concept on this one, right? So here we've got a floating city with a kind of beautiful image already. There's obviously room for work, but I have to say it feels very professional and very attractive. I want to ask Sean a quick question or two. So Sean, what city is it?
It's supposed to be Tokyo.
Tokyo. And
Yeah,
and
I'm
this,
gonna.
yeah, tell me.
Okay, so I'm gonna like add like details to the buildings. I'm planning on doing like neon lights, making it look really like bright, kind of.
Make it look
And
like what?
like, I'm gonna put like big neon lights on some of the buildings and stuff. Maybe put some like really cool imagery. I'm trying to
Got it.
test out the waters with it.
So I'm going to ask you a quick question because it does look great. But do you
Thank
have
you.
a specific reason why Tokyo should be floating?
Mainly because I was thinking about how it's like the most populated, like most densely populated city in the planet, I'm pretty sure. So I was like, what if they take it to new heights? I don't, this is just like something I thought was really cool. And
Gotcha.
yeah.
So this is what I want you to think about because you strike me as a really thoughtful artist, and I want to throw something at you.
Mhm.
So I've seen a lot of floating cities. You want to get that
Mhm.
out of the way. Don't feel bad about that. What I want you to do though is spin it in your own way. For example, I've heard a lot of blues, and a lot of it sounds very similar, but I'm not going to tell a new musician don't play the blues. I'm going to say try to find something to bring to the table. So even
Mhm.
though this idea is a little bit familiar, what I'd like to see is more of why Tokyo. So
Okay.
I need to know that it's Tokyo. For
Mhm.
example, did Godzilla attack Tokyo? Does anyone know Godzilla? He was a famous huge monster. Yeah. And I think he attacked Tokyo most famously. Well, that would be a good reason for Tokyo to float, to try to escape Godzilla. So I don't know. We need
What? Yeah.
some kind of reasoning behind all of this. It's not like, oh, you know what? I love magic. So I'm going to make everyone a magician in a random city. You know,
Mhm.
that, it's okay, but it's not the gold. So I think you could spin this into the gold.
Okay.
Let me know it's Tokyo somehow, hopefully in more ways than one.
All right. Thank
As
you.
well. You're welcome. Some of them are large and they take a little bit longer, as we've experienced already. I'm going to actually try this a little differently. And this one's a PDF, which should make it kind of easy to see. There we go. So, very thoughtful method she's got. This is such an interesting way to present the first little digital draft. She brought in her drawing from the prior week and started building right on top of it. I just think that's great. So I just want to get a quick look. She's got some notes on it. That's Frank Lloyd Wright House and Canal Bridge. This is Buffalo, so Buffalo, New York, I'm imagining. And she seems to know a lot about it. I have to say, I love this stage. Sarah, where are you, Sarah?
I'm right here.
It's such a beautiful stage. I got to tell you something, just as artists, forget that I'm the teacher for a minute. Man, do I love seeing people's sketches. I love seeing their process. Sometimes I'm more interested in that than the actual stuff we do, these finished things. I like the way you think, Sarah. I really
Thank
do.
you.
Can I ask you quickly, though, like this really surreal kind of wild moment of that big face and the hands and all. Can you tell me more about that? What's that about?
I'm not really sure, but like on Elmwood, there's this like electric pole box, I guess, and it has like a graffitied face on it, and I thought it was really interesting. And I've always been kind of like curious about it, so I wanted to put it in.
And this is the face?
Yeah, or it's
And
like
can I
my
get
version of it.
these I guess these are stalagmites that are coming from like a
Those
cave top?
are
Are they part
those
of your
are no, those are just icicles because Buffalo is cold all the time. So I wanted to like add
got
in
it?
the cold aspect.
Really very interesting. So, Sarah, you're making me think about my own project differently.
Oh, really?
Like there's a little part of me that almost wishes we almost don't run and do this, but I almost wonder what would happen if we actually labeled those landmarks.
Mm,
So it actually said Frank Lloyd's house here and the Canal Side Bridge there.
yeah.
You ever see those travel maps? They're very popular in the world right now. And they're drawn in Illustrator, by the way. Almost every city in the world has one. They're these cartoon maps of the cities. Even villages have them. Um, so I don't know if that would make it more interesting in terms of getting what you're trying to say about Buffalo, because you're sort of juggling, lots of stuff. I really like the way this is headed. Most of me just wants to see what you come up with and not really ask for anything specific. You're heading in a great direction. The only thing I do want to say to you and to everybody is this. We think in line a lot in Illustrator because we like closed objects. So we kind of organize our page, and some of us think about color early, but some wait till later. And it's okay either way. But once the color's there, at least at that point, one has to decide how you feel about outlines. Like when there's a lot of color and the color's right, very often artwork is better with all the strokes turned off. Unless the person loved the strokes for some reason, then they need to stay. And that usually means it's probably not a 1 point black stroke. So I love the way this is going. And you could see that the strokes are very important to this building. So they may need to stay. And would these do well with a 1 point black stroke? These might, because it's architecture, and everything's so straight. What kind of brush, what kind of line would we imagine on that building? But the trees would be different if they have strokes. So all I'm saying to everybody in here is when using line, make sure you love it or don't use it. It's a simple philosophy, because sometimes it's just there as coloring book. Like when you were a kid, the lines are there just to get me to the color. So you really got to figure out where you stand. Anyway, I like this one a lot. I'm really excited to see what you come up with. I think it doesn't need my interference, to be honest. I'm going to download this one. And, oh, Sarah, that's yours also. All right, I didn't realize that. I'm just going to move on then. Okay. I want to say something to you quickly. I hope you guys find this funny. So my daughter's about the average age of the average FIT student. Um, and she's got this girlfriend who's an art student at one of your competing schools. Forget which one. I think it's Pratt. And she goes over there and eavesdrops on the classes. She sits off to the side. My daughter comes back and reports to me what those other teachers are doing. But the one thing that I found interesting was um, they know these other students who sit on each other's classes. They just hang out, especially when it's critiques. They just hide and they just listen. I can't tell you how happy that made me to know, because I know lots of students who try to escape critiques, or they only listen when it's their work. But I have to say, the student who only listens when their work is being talked about is worse. In the end, they're never going to be as good as the person who listens to everyone else's critiques, you know? So, all right. All right, we're coming back. We're going to take a look at Sam's. So, again, one thing that I love when I'm looking at digital drafts is, yeah, I always start with one thing. Is it beautiful? This is beautiful, before I get to the assignment. To be honest. Sam, where are you? Are you there? Is he here today?
Yeah, hi.
Oh, there you are. Yeah. So, Sam, it's beautiful. And I know there's more to do, but something and I hope you don't mind me confiding in you. So I have a lot of art on Instagram, and a lot of those pieces, the first hit is beautiful. First day, I got something beautiful. And the whole thing is, but is it rich enough for my goals? And there's part of me, it's like, oh, why be so greedy? Just leave this beautiful thing the way it is. And then the rest of me is like, but how do you ever cross bridges, so to speak? How do you ever, get to the next stage without getting risky? So I have to say, I love when the early steps are beautiful. It's always encouraging, isn't it? In your own work, I'm sure you all know that. Hey, this is sort of rocking, but then sometimes you get nervous about moving forward. Anyway, I'm not, oh, hang on 1 second. There's someone slamming on my door. Give me 1 minute. Sorry. Thank you very much. What just happened there? There we go. So, anyway, coming back to it, I love this. It's got so much potential. I want to ask Sam a couple of very fast questions. I think I have to speed up a little bit because there's new techniques today. Sam, where is this?
This is London.
All right, I thought so. Just wanted to be sure. All right. And what's going to be the reimagined part? What's going to happen in London?
It's gonna be raining tea.
I love it. So are we going to get to see a lot of teacups or tea kettles or something to evidence what it is?
Yes, I was gonna have someone on the bridge holding out a mug, catching the tea rain droplets.
So I want to say something to you. Don't be shy about copying any figure that has value if you need more than one person. Like something I'll often do is I'll take a figure that's important and copy it 5, 6 times. And then I'll change the body weight with just the black arrow or the transform tool. I'll change the skin color. I'll give somebody a hat, but I'll save myself loads of drawing because your idea is really very, very interesting. And you just have to make sure it comes across that the image is as fun as the concept. So maybe what you picture is perfect. One person, with their, their teacup, waiting for the tea, but it may make a much more, it's a surreal idea. Really it's something Magritte might have done. Have you ever seen Magritte?
No.
I'm going to give you a quick peek at Magritte, but it's always about making sure people get it. I want to show you something quickly. I bet some people in here have seen Magritte before. He's sort of the second most famous surrealist after Salvador Dali. I'm sure he'd hate me saying that, really. And you'll recognize some of these. They're very odd work, but I want to look for some of these that kind of help me make my point. I don't know. I hope you guys can make this one out. All these people are floating. And if you had one person floating, it would have been interesting. Sure would have been interesting, but not as interesting as this. And if, he had to hand paint these, but in Illustrator, this would just been a lot of copying. So, the question is always, what's going to make the point? In this case, this apple the size of a room, one was enough. So I'm not saying quantity is always better. Here's a single person, but doesn't look like a particularly interesting image. Anyway, this guy's worth getting a look at for anybody. So anyway, that's what I want to say to you, Sam. I love the way this is going, though. I'm anxious to see the reimagining part. But you're fine considering it's the first digital draft, so I don't want anyone to get hung up about it. I see Sam's got, he's got, here we go, sorry. You know, Rachel and I got to talk about this a little bit in, I want to, last week. So, I was saying to her about this drawing. Let me just try to zoom out a little bit. There we go. San Francisco, it's got some famous Chinese buildings there, and it's got the very famous trolley going right down the middle. She confided in me that she found a very good photograph that satisfied a lot of the need she had to communicate San Francisco. And I was asking her about this giant woman, who's the most interesting thing and the first thing to get some color at this stage, right here. And I've been thinking about this. Rachel, you here?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, I see. The whole idea of this project, I could have let loose on this and said, okay, guys, I want a surreal city. Take a real city and make it a surreal city. I could have done that. And it would have been easier, right? Anyone could have gone Salvador Dali crazy or Magritte crazy on it. But what I did ask, which was a little harder, was I wanted you to reimagine the city in a relevant way so that you wouldn't do the same thing to Tokyo as you would do to New York or to Paris or to San Francisco. That the choice you made about that fantastic element has something to do with that city. So I don't know what this person has to do with that yet. There's a number of Chinese buildings there in this view of San Francisco. Maybe she should be holding a bowl of something with chopsticks, and they're talking about San Francisco becoming increasingly Asian, which is fine. I had a relative in LA, and her area, almost no one speaks English. And that's okay. It's not judgmental. It's kind of fun. Or it could be about advertising, this huge person. I was saying to Rachel last week, it comes back to me now, that if any of you have been on 42nd Street lately, the whole place is turned into an advertisement. The buildings have ads that are so huge, they look just like Blade Runner, the science fiction movie. There's projections everywhere, especially at night. The place has become a living, breathing science fiction advertisement for anything. So I don't know. I might want to see more huge figures here. And maybe each one of them's holding some kind of product or some object from San Francisco. But in some sense,
That's what I was
makes
going for.
is it? Great.
Yeah, like she is like a 3D billboard in a way.
That's great. I think a couple more so that, that point is clarified. I think that might be all you need. One thing I'm also curious about, which is technical, is how you're going to go about with color. Like these drawings look beautiful, but they're all open shapes and lines. So there won't be any way to fill most of these with color. You could use color on a layer underneath them, or you'd have to redraw them because you can't fill open objects. So, if you haven't worked out that yet, Rachel, you should consider a layer underneath the drawing where all the color goes. And this way line and color don't have to match. It's free. It could be fun. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. It was just a rough sketch.
Gotcha. All right. I like the concept. I like the design. It's well off the ground.
Thank you.
So beautiful, another just beautiful image. I mean, a lot of you guys are really feeling Illustrator, which I really appreciate. This building's being lifted into the air by balloons. It looks like we're already in the clouds, so we're only seeing the top of the skyscrapers, which is kind of interesting. Lori, where are you, Lorianne? There you are. I see you. Hi. Hi. Hey, where is this place?
It's supposed to be San Francisco, so I'm gonna add the cable car and things like that.
Ooh, why don't you put the cable car over the clouds?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, putting it over. Because I was trying to do Up the movie plus San Francisco. So the house is a painted lady's house, but I gotta work more on it so it looks more like it.
Well, remember, not everyone's seen that movie, right? So don't get too tied up with the movie. But there's a whole history of people floating things with balloons. I mean, a real guy only about 1 year ago floated himself off in his lawn chair, and successfully, by the way. And he was all over the news around the world. So, You know, the motif didn't belong to the movie who made Up. It's equally yours. So one thing I want to say to everybody in here, if you are all working for me, I want to tell you very frankly something I would say to each of you. When you have an idea, I'm going to look at it and find the way to use it the most possible. If you have an idea that I like, I'm like, how can we use it more than you're using it? So for example, it's San Francisco, but because it's up in the clouds, currently, it could be anywhere in the world, any place that has tall buildings, you know, and the house that's floated to me felt like somebody who wants to join the top. So going to where the new is going to be, the only ones that stick through the clouds, and they're floating their house up there to be equal status. And it's kind of a fun idea too. But the thing that's missing is why any given place. So she mentioned the cable car, and I'm like, oh, that's perfect. Because everyone thinks San Francisco when they see those cars. So maybe the city has now grown so much that it exists beneath and above the clouds, in which case people need to get around. So I like your idea, and that would help it become more specific to the place. Also, I want to repeat something I was just saying to one of your colleagues. You know, if that house knocks you out and you think it might be cool to have 3 or 4 houses floating, balloons, copy that one. You know, make one big in the foreground, make some small in the distance. You could change their colors or whatever you want so it's not obvious. If you like the idea of more than one house being elevated to the clouds. So one thing I love about Illustrator is the freedom to copy stuff. You work 3 hours on something, it takes you 2 minutes to get the next copy. You know? And if it works with the idea, why not? Really like the start of this.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Let's see. This is pretty interesting. So let's see, this Shibuya station, which I personally don't know anything about, it looks like a very graphical representation of a crowd. Let me make this one larger because it's oriented differently. Whoops, carried away there. June, I want to ask you a little bit about this. Where is Shibuya Station? Is she here?
Oh yeah, hi. Oh, I
Hi.
wanted to put the so I decided to do Shibuya, which is it's kind of like a city that's in Japan.
Okay.
It's like it's a really popular spot in Japan, and I
Okay,
wanted to
good.
put the name in creatively, so I was like, oh, if I'm gonna put the train in, I might as well like put the sign, so I could just put Shibuya there instead of
Right.
just having the name Shibuya just somewhere like randomly placed. I was like, I think it would make more sense if I just left it on the train sign, so it's like I'm stating it, but it's not too obvious.
No, that works perfectly. I want to ask you, have you been to Shibuya?
No, but I really want to.
Gotcha. I haven't heard of it. That's why I was asking. So what's going on here at Shibuya Station?
I'm actually surprised that you don't know what it is because like it's such a popular place because of the Shibuya crossing, which is like
Uh-huh.
it's this giant area where like the second that the crosswalk says go, like everyone starts walking in like different directions, and it's such a chaotic thing that you always see in like in movies and TV shows and video games. Like
Okay. So
it's
tell me,
it's
how are you reimagining it? I love the graphic look. The graphic look is very reimagined. But is there some event that's reimagined or some change to Shibuya other than the design of your illustration?
I kind of just wanted to like portray the feeling of chaos that I always get whenever I see Shibuya, which is why I tried to layer like all the different like iconic parts of it, like the entrance of the Meiji Shrine and then the Hachiko statue, and I kind of just wanted to keep on layering, and I'm planning on like adding even more like little people because that's
Gotcha.
kind of what I get. Like I
Listen,
kind
I
of
wanna,
the
you know,
page.
since we only have a little bit of time, I just want to clarify something. I like you're being so bold with the style, and I would like for everybody to take note of it. She's really kind of broken off from all the other projects and finding a new experimental, approach to her illustration, which, by the way, I think is a very valid approach pictorially. So I'm pretty happy with the nerve of it, and it's really starting to work, especially in certain areas. So I have little doubt that you're going to make it improve. The biggest gap for me is it reimagined really? You're telling me the place is crowded, so you're making it crowded. I don't know that that's really enough to say that it's reimagined. So I don't know what you could come up with that might exaggerate that unless there's something else you want to exaggerate. So a reimagining is often an exaggeration. Sometimes it's a flat out addition, what if type stuff. But I don't know enough about this place to give you a recommendation. you know, everything I know about Japan, right? I assume this is in Japan.
Yeah.
Everything I know about Japan is Buddhist and art. Know lots about those two things, but I don't really know enough to tell you about what to do. So I'd like you to reconsider what you could do to make this not just an illustration of your view of Shibuya, which is an interesting view, but it has to be a transformation of some sort.
Okay.
Okay, and I'm sure you'll come up with something. I'm not saying you have to redo this. I think it's just a small rethinking before you go further.
Yeah.
So it's a challenge, I'll admit. Just take a little while. I'm going to download it. This may take a little while. Juliana, I'm going to come right back to it. Don't let me forget. I'm going to do
Yeah,
my best.
okay. I'm not sure
I'm
why
gonna-
it's taking so long to download. It showed up immediately on mine when I put it in the drive.
Really? Maybe my internet's just acting up. So I'm going to move forward, and then I promise I'm going to come right back to it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Now, if I continue to have this problem, we could safely assume it's on my end. There we go. All right. So, you know, I have to say, like, one thing that I'm kind of excited by is people are breaking out. You know, things are not looking the same. I mean, the hardest project to look like an individual was the last one, right? Because we were all really looking hard at those photographs, you know. But here we're kind of like opening doors. There's a lot of freedom. So I'm gonna say something about this one that I really quite like. For one, even the 1 point black lines here are working for me, which I'm always complaining about them, but something about this one looks great. I want to see if I could show you this artist's work. I don't know how easy it is to find online. I want to try, see if I could. I'd like to show the artist a little bit of this. This artist named Mobius. I'm no expert on Mobius, you know. He's got a old, huge fan base. Let's see if we can get a look at these. Here we go. So, you know, this artist often uses really thin, simple black lines, and yet it's really very dependent on his gradients and his flat colors. And I think they're gorgeous. They're always fantasy work. So they get, you know, some of them are much stranger than others. But, you know, he's a person who makes very simple line really work. I think a lot of it's because he's just so good with color. Mobius. Oh, I spelt it wrong. M-O-E. In any case, I want to come back to the artist's work. So I love the color. I love the strangeness in this. I want to ask you quickly, June, where is Migiam?
It's where I live.
Oh, really? What country is it? I'm sorry.
In Korea.
In Korea. Gotcha. And tell me about, you know, I noticed you've got the handful of things you have there are so interesting. There's like a frog and there's this surgical bag in the background. So I'm trying to, you know, connect these things as well as this train system on, looks like they're on the moon. So can you tell me a little bit about what's going on?
In my town, there is a huge hospital there, and we have a lot of seniors, old people live here. And
What about the frog?
There's a big river there, and the frog. I was kind of thinking symbolic
of the river. One more question. The
yeah.
moon, that is the moon up in the sky, right? With the train on it. So Tell me about that. Why is that there?
Um, the train line, the subway line, is kind of new here. It is made newly,
Gotcha.
so that feels
Futuristic.
yeah. Futuristic.
Listen, thank you. You know, you're learning art. You're learning a new language. You're a very impressive person. So I thank you for like trying your hardest to communicate. You're gonna say I really like in this illustration. It's so odd. It's another one of those where I almost don't want to say much. You know, it's like it is a reinvention and it's based on real stuff from her hometown. So I'm not going to know every place in the world. I might have to ask questions, but it's a fun fantasy and the colors are going really well. I'm looking forward to seeing what happens elsewhere because you know like right now it looks you know like a really nice start and I'm kind of curious to see where you go but right now uh, I liked it stylistically. I like the kind of brave connection or lack of connection even between these symbols. You know, because you know when you think about a city, things are not always connected. You know, if we would, for example, uh, the town I used to live in has a huge French population in Brooklyn. You know, who'd have thought? You know, and is that connected in any way to the nearby towns? No, you know, not really. And that's one of the great things about New York and most major cities is that there's so much variety. Sometimes things affect each other. Sometimes they don't. There's another neighborhood nearby where there are many people from Puerto Rico and many people from other parts of the Caribbean, right? So they're separate populations, but they do have something that connects them. So I have to say, as artists, I don't want to be too logical. This assignment is not entirely logical. It starts with some logical challenges, but it doesn't end there because it's art. Strong image. I know where this one is only because I've been there. That's the Taj Mahal back there, in the big Buddha in the front. And we could see Indian foods on the left and on the right, even labeled one that says curry shop on it. So I just wanted to say for the record that you know India is not a Buddhist country. The Buddha was born in northern India, and he moved. His philosophy spread through China and then through that part of Asia before it left the rest of the world. It was gone in India in about 500 years, kind of developed everywhere else. So it's interesting, as well as the guy who built the Taj Mahal was not a Buddhist in any way. I'm pretty sure he was Muslim in a Hindu country, but it's okay. You know what I mean? This is a reinvention progress. It makes it feel like that's a temple to the Buddha back there. When it was actually a gift from one lover to another lover. The Taj Mahal was, believe it or not, it was like a Valentine's present, sort of, back there. So I just want to say about this, I love the color, right? The person's got a very clear triangular design that they're working on. These buildings here are very, very weak compared to these other things, which are very, very strong. And it's an early draft, so I'm definitely not picking on the artist in any way, but these are going to have to go or be swapped out. And the artist probably intended that. Maybe they're just placeholders. But Hibby, where are you? There you are. This is my
Yes,
favorite
ma'am.
work of yours. This is by far
Oh,
my
really?
favorite. Yeah, I mean, the Taj Mahal is very sure of itself. The Buddha is very
Yeah,
sure
no.
of itself. The colors are very sure of itself. The very specific triangular design is sure of
Yeah.
itself. So that's what I want. And this is what you need all along. You got to trust yourself and dive in. You know, it's not, I can't like tell you every step of the way what you need to do to make things better. Do more of this,
Okay.
right? I mean, this
Yeah.
is starting to sing. So this, I do want you to do something about these, which look like, you know, the first couple weeks of Illustrator. And these back here look like someone who knows what they're doing and take it further, you know? But I
Okay.
have to say, it's well off the ground. I feel good about this one. So, you know what's interesting about this one? I keep talking about strokes and not strokes. It's almost a relief to see some of these objects have no outlines and others do. So I'm going to borrow this artist's point. I got to tell you something. I'm all about that in my own work. I've gone through periods where it was all about line. I was originally trained as a cartoonist, and that's the way cartoonists think. And then I spent 15 years, 20 years as a painter, and I had no lines because most painters don't use lines. And right now, it's all about what do I need in this part or that part. And if I need the line, there it is. If I don't, there it isn't. So I'm curious to see how this is going to develop. I want to talk to the artist just quickly. Hadassah, oops, sorry. Let me get that out again. Oh, then I want to come back to the one that finally loaded. Hadassah, where are you?
I'm
If you,
here.
if you got you there, you could shout out. Hi. So, where is this place?
Oh, so it's actually going to be, sorry that my thing keeps ringing. It's actually Miami Beach. So those are going to be all the Art Deco buildings. This is obviously
Right.
the beginning. That's like the old style of the buildings there, Miami Beach, down by like
Right.
South Beach. I
This
actually
looks just like Miami, by the way. You achieved already.
what?
What's going to happen?
Oh, so what's gonna happen is like I live in Miami Beach. So growing up in school, they used to always tell us that by the year 2050, Miami Beach will be underwater. So
Yeah.
like the Blue Science Project was like, what are you gonna create that's gonna like save Miami Beach? So my goal is when I'm done with the buildings, I think either I'm gonna lay them, how it would be like out of the sand, or maybe even bury them a little bit within the sands. But I want to try to create a way that I'm gonna put like a top layer over the whole thing, and then maybe just lower the opacity so it looks like the whole city's underwater.
If you try that, play with the blending modes too,
Yeah.
if you
So
remember those, or look them up if need be, or I could show you next week.
yeah, that would be great. Kind of a little bit like SpongeBob Bikini Bottom esque, like it's all gonna be underwater a little bit.
I like that idea a lot.
Yeah.
So Hadassah, I don't mean to cut you off. It's just that I know I'm taking too long and I have techniques I want to share. I want to say what I like best about this. This looks just like that place. And I like the fact that you're letting the colors speak by not outlining everything. Like this pink building and this yellowish building, they're getting a chance to sing because they're not contained with unnecessary lines. Then I think that's working. And there's a lot of room, right? You already kind of got off the ground. It feels like your place. Your concept sounds like fun too. By the way, I come from Rockaway Beach, which is one of the only beach towns in New York. And it was drowned by a hurricane twice in its history, but the last one was just terrible. Drowned most of the town and wreaked absolute havoc. Sandy, and it's very much on my mind. The way what we could expect in the future. So I'm interested in what you're saying. Right now we have the right to make it playful. Doesn't we have to make life playful, and it's a way to make people pay attention too. In the meantime, I like the start on this one. I have to say, folks, I do apologize that there's not more time for us just to talk and stuff.
Professor, do you want to
Yes.
go back to
Oh,
mine
yes,
really
I
quick?
do. I do.
Thank you.
You would. I'm so bad at remembering stuff. But thanks for helping out. So let me just zoom out a little bit on this one here. Is this Coney Island?
No, it's actually Ocean City, New Jersey. I've
Oh,
been
you
going there
mentioned
every
that.
year since I was 1.
Oh, great. It's funny because anybody who knows a beach town, with commerce is going to relate to this. I love your rendition of the boardwalk, by the way.
Oh, thank you. I'm still trying to work on how to get the perspective of it because it's actually a texture and I couldn't figure out how to change that.
I may be able to show you something today.
That would be helpful.
Yeah, so let me see if I could do that. But I do want to say to everybody, remember we're artists and we have the right to throw out perspective and then embrace perspective and then mix perspective with flat. We have that right. As long as it looks beautiful in the end, everyone's going to accept that you meant it that way. Picasso was able to draw a killer portrait before he headed into Cubism. And frankly, even in the Renaissance, there was a period when everything was flat. And then suddenly they started to learn about perspective. But before they mastered it, there was some of the most beautiful work that ever came out of the Renaissance. It was half flat and half not. I want to give you a peek. So I'm going to take a stab at it, try to think of a good example. Whoops. I'm hoping I get a good Giotto, or Giotto, some people like to say. This guy is just amazing. I have to some for you. Yeah, maybe this one will do. Come on. This one's taking a long time. This is the one I want to show you here. I hope you guys can see this a little bit. But if you notice, these buildings in the back are trying to be in perspective, and yet the whole thing feels wildly flat. And if we had a larger version, we could study, what's doing it, because artists have wanted to do this purposely since we became conscious enough to even notice it. There's a constant game of things that are dimensional and then flat. Here, all the people's auras around their head, their halos, are flattening out in one big piece of gold. This artist does this over and over again, these combinations of space and flatness. And I love this part of history. So I'm saying like the year 1000 maybe to 1200 in that window. You see a lot of it in Italy. So anyway, it's up to you. If more perspective helps, then it helps. If it doesn't, keep this as a backup idea, because I think it's looking pretty cool. I want to
Okay,
ask you quickly, though. I
Yeah.
apologize to rush everybody, but what's the main heart of the concept, the reimagining part?
So it's going to be like inverted. So instead of people on the boardwalk and running the shops, it's going to be the sea creatures, on the boardwalk and running the shops.
That works. That really works. Because like every beach town is sort of fantasized on some level about that. I mean, like if you go out to Coney Island, every mural is about dolphins and stuff. They don't even have dolphins in Coney Island. But the crabs and dolphins and all of that, a whole idea of spinning the elements, inverting it, as you put, really, really works. What would happen if there was one day where you're the teacher and all of your teachers had to take your class? We all sat there wondering what you were going to do. Boy, I know some of you would wreak havoc on us. I'd have to be absent for that day. But anyway, I like the concept. I'm looking forward to
Thank you.
seeing more of the idea. The rendering is already going rather well.
Oh, thank you.
I got lost suddenly. I think we did see Hadassah's. That's true. All right. Annette, did we already see this one? Oh yes. So Annette, I'm guessing this is Washington Square Park in New York City.
Yeah.
Is it? It is. And it's very loyal, very faithful, and knew what it was at a glance. Particularly like the very strange light pole. Does it really do that, or is that part of your reinvention?
So my idea is that like it's like New York, but it's all like nature is just like taking over it, and it's like very opposite of New York City because New York City is very like modern and like clean and stuff. So I was like, okay, well, what if nature just kind of like took over it and like I made the arch that is in Washington Square Park. I like kind of beat it up a little bit and like made the stone like um broken. I don't know how to describe it. And then there's gonna be
Yes.
like buildings in the back
Listen,
that they're all destroyed.
So listen, I have to stop you. I like the drawing so far. It's very early in its development. I like the concept even more. I like them both. But I have to say there's one strategic issue that I have. If I wanted to say that New York City was becoming overgrown, it's like the future and the nation consumed the city, the last place I would choose to show my audience would be a park, because the park always had a lot of nature. So I don't know if this is Washington Square Park. That probably isn't the best choice. It'd be better to choose a completely building dominated part of the city, so that we really feel it when the trees take over and the rest of it. I
I was
wouldn't go choosing a park where it's already.
right. I was also thinking though, like even though like nature's taken over and stuff, I feel like I was thinking, okay, what if like it's taken over, but people are still like living in those areas and stuff, and there would still be like people in the park and stuff like that. That's one thing that I was
Listen,
thinking
I'm just
about.
going to say heart to heart to you, because I respect you. I like that idea, and I like the way you're drawing. I really do. I like them both, but I do honestly think that that's not a good idea to start in the park. It's just the
Okay.
opposite of what you want. It really, really is. Like if I wanted to say that we were all driven into the desert, I'm not going to use a little piece of beach. I'm going to find the flat out desert and put my stuff there. If we're going to move into space, I'm not going to go just near space. I'm going to go into outer space. It depends. You really want to make your point. If nature took over the cities, what we all want, look, if there was an ad for a sci-fi movie where New York was overtaken by nature, what part of the city would they choose for that ad? Think about it. Would they choose Rockefeller Center? Very likely. Would they choose the World Trade Center? Very likely. Would they choose Central Park? Not a chance. So listen, I like your work a lot. Total faith in a rock this project, really I do. And if you want to stick with this illusion, it's really the only thing that's a lot of work here is the arch. Keep it. You know, bring in other buildings. You could rethink this city. Just bring in stuff that stands for the city. Make sure that I know it's a city, unless the concept is not what I'm hearing. Do you understand me?
Yeah.
Everybody froze. Yeah. So I'm sorry if that's a little disappointing, and I could be wrong. So here's your plan B. You could stick with what you're doing and do it so well that I get it. You know, and that I'm always glad to say, you know, I was wrong. I did that on a few of the last projects, right? So again, like if you're seeing it in your head and that point is really being made, then you go ahead and do it. Stick to your guns, and I'm probably going to see it. But if you're not really seeing it clear, you're kind of waffling on the concept, that's the problem, right? You need higher contrast. Nature takes over the city, right? The parks are a way of bringing nature there naturally. It's a very different argument. So I have to say, I like where it's going, and I have faith in you making the best decision going forward. I honestly mean that. Don't need you to take my advice. I'm happy when people take my advice, but I'm also very happy when I see them not and pull it off and really make it work.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Annette. I'm Danielle. There we go. All right. So Tulum are these kind of wonderful ruins in Mexico, and they're an odd set of the remnants of a kind of small but ancient city right on the sea, and it looks kind of like this on the right. So I'm imagining that this is a huge jellyfish, and the sign pointing to Tulum. I want to unfortunately I'm not in Illustrator. Yes.
I was actually thinking about it like, yeah, it's an underground, like ruin town, but I was thinking like it's in a sinkhole because I know sinkholes are a very prominent landmark of like around those areas in Mexico. So like, I mean, I know this is like very like early in my Illustrator, but like that hole on top is like the opening and like we're in the
I
sinkhole.
see.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard the term cenote?
Yeah. My family's from Mexico, so I go
So,
all the time.
so do you mean a cenote or do you
Yeah,
mean a
yeah.
sinkhole?
Yeah, cenote.
You meant the cenote. Okay. So
Yeah.
just for anybody who might not have heard of it, you know, sinkholes are this weird event lately where a part of a random place just develops a massive hole in the ground, and they happen kind of randomly. And I don't know much about them, but usually you'll see a car stuck in it and the newscast all over it. But a cenote is an underground lake, which was often treated by the Maya and other people as a religious site. Um, and so she's taken Tulum, which is beachside. So it's a beach town, you know, sort of. I mean, at this stage. And she's actually treating it like one of these underground lakes. So I have that right, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you know, I see where you're headed, and you're saying it's early. That's the hole on top. I thought it was a jellyfish
I know.
floating over it,
I'm trying to
but I
figure out
could see
the
you
name.
making that work as a hole. Well,
Yeah. Those are supposed to be like mossy vines
so
hanging, but you know.
I got it. It's young. It's young,
Yeah.
and I think you've got a few elements that I like. Did you draw that bird?
No.
Very nicely drawn. That looks like the bird alone took a lot of time.
No.
No?
That's honestly
Oh,
just a
that's good.
picture.
So
I just
anyway,
put it.
oh, just a picture.
Yeah,
All
yeah.
right. So you know you can't use it, right?
No, I know. It
Gotcha.
was just to
So
like make
listen
it
to
look a little more developed.
you know, just Danielle, I'm not even saying this for you. I'm saying this for everybody, because almost every semester somebody either doesn't understand me or makes believe like they don't, and they use a piece of someone else's artwork. So I just want to make sure, in case anyone feels confused about that, no, just no.
Yeah, I wasn't gonna include it.
Looking at
Just
you artwork when they're on this project. Gotcha. Yeah, I'm just saying
Uh,
anybody, like you can get a photo of a similar exotic bird and use that to help. But anyway, I like your concept a lot. I'm looking forward to seeing it. Guys, I
okay.
am gonna look at, I think one more, we'll take a break. Um, I got a peek at this one earlier because it was in the box early. Claire's. Oops, hang on a second. Let me get that out. It's a snazzy one, isn't it? It's very, very developed. You know, guys, a lot of you have disappeared. I'm thinking, is it the internet or did everyone turn their cameras off? You know, because if
No,
everyone turned their
I'm
cameras
here.
off, I think a lot of people have left the room. You there, Mike? I appreciate that. Listen, I want to say something about this one. The design is very professional feeling. You know, it's got a very strong set of graphic qualities. So I got to give it an immediate thumbs up. I also like the concept a lot, but Transylvania is not a city. And I have to say something. I'm going to change this assignment next year. So I'm going to be sort of generous with you guys this year. You know, I've been reviewing like how much restriction is good for an art student. Too little is definitely bad. Too much is definitely bad. So I'm not going to torture um, Claire about using an entire country for the reimagined city. You list, Claire, am I wrong? Is this part of Transylvania?
Well, Transylvania, it's not like a whole country, it's just a region. So like none
Oh,
of the cities in Transylvania are very well known though. So I figured it'd
gotcha.
be easier to do Transylvania.
Thank you for informing me. That makes perfect sense. And I'm easily going to accept this. And it's strange that I actually had a nurse from Transylvania. And I wish she didn't tell me that just when she was about to take my blood. You know, it sounds like I'm making that up, but it's true. She was legitimately from Transylvania, and she's the nurse who's taking my blood with a needle. But anyway, I like this idea a lot. The very familiar vampire reference, one of their very, very famous castles. So I really, really like this. I think, hey, I want to say something. It looks like we're having internet problems. Can you hear me still?
Yeah. Yeah, you're cutting in and out a little bit, but we can hear
Am I?
you.
Okay,
We can
thank you.
hear.
Because I could see that we're having issues. We're going to take a break right after this. I like this one so much. I almost want to say to Claire, don't do anything. But in all fairness, the thing about this that's somewhat missing is the only reference to actual Transylvania is one building. And so that is like a little light. The design is so professional and the concept's solid. I want to be honest with you, Claire, you're going to get a high grade with this any which way, to be honest. But if I was going to take it further, I would try to figure out how to bring in more that is about that place, Transylvania. So it's not reliant on one building and the title. And I don't know, it could be in the background. I don't know if that would mess with your design or however you think about how to do it. But if there's any way to up the amount that of representation of the place, uh, that would be helpful. But I have to say, it's a knockout project, so I'm a little on the fence about my own advice. But really nicely done, guys. Listen, I know we're having some internet issues right now, and it's time for a break anyway. I just want to take a quick assessment of where we're at before we go further. And we only have a few left, but the internet is weird, and I do want to restart it, at least on my end. So we're going to take a break right now. We'll come back. We'll look at a few. We're going to learn some new techniques. It's 4:20 now, and I want to make sure we have time for everything we need. So I'm going to start again at 4:40, right? So everybody take off, wash your face, grab a coffee. That's bad advice. Too late. Do whatever you want. I'll see you at 4:40. Don't be late though. We have very important stuff to do today, right? So we're breaking at 4:40, right? I'm going to keep repeating it only because almost everyone's got their cameras off. So I don't know who's hearing me, who's not. I'm even going to chat it. 4:40. Thank you. Thank you. I'm getting some feedback. All right, everybody. I'll see you then. 4:40. Hello, everybody. Let's see. All right. I'm going to start screen sharing and jump right in. I'm delaying only about a minute because I especially don't want any of the artists who've been waiting to see their work to miss it. So I think we're ready. All right. Okay, let's get back to the work. All right, so this one here is really mostly the assets that the artist intends on using in the beginning of a drawing. So Christine, did I open the right thing? Am I in the right place?
Yeah, it's super early, and that is not. I'm not going to take credit for that. That is not my own drawing. That's an internet image.
Got it. So listen, I just want to repeat something. One, you could catch up, make sure that you've got something substantial by next week, though, would be great. But I do want to say, everybody, I want to repeat something. Don't use drawings as assets. Just don't. Use photographs. I think the only other thing I could be comfortable with would be sculpture if you need a figure. The idea is if you're already looking at a drawing and reinterpreting the drawing, half of the process has been done for you. And if you're like, oh, I'm going to change it, I'm going to change, is what students always say. Professionals won't do that. They're just not going to do it. They need a building, they'll find a photo of the building. So I'm not saying it's illegal or anything immoral about it. This is a very honorable artist. I have no doubts about that. But I'm just saying, in terms of learning, in the old days, I would have said, don't even use photographs. Go there. Obviously, that's not possible for us. So now say photos are okay, but not of drawings, not of paintings. Never use the word picture. Oh, I just used a picture. It's either a photo, a drawing, a painting, or something else, right? Make yourself a promise. Look at artwork to be inspired, put it away, never use it in your own process. So, and anyway, Christine, I know you had the best intentions, so don't feel anything about this, really. I just want to reiterate that because I honestly mean it. You're going to learn a lot more from finding a building and doing a drawing based on the photo than you are looking at all at somebody else's drawing. So I'd rather you not. Okay. So again, don't mean that in any way judgmentally. I'm very protective of you, Christina, and everybody else using the habits that'll make you learn the most, in my opinion.
Thank you.
Okay, excellent. I'm glad. I love the way you take advice. I really do. Okay, this is just so much fun. I mean, this place, wherever it is, and I'm going to ask the artist in a couple of minutes, but not just yet, is completely overrun with snow. And I have to say, the killer part of it, though, is this absolutely beautiful version of this building, which is treated very simply. And I want you to notice there's no strokes on it because this particular building didn't need strokes if the color was going to be that good. So very clear darks where the shadows need to be. The windows are just dark rectangles. These long lines are part of the architecture itself. They're not strokes. This just looks great. What I'm kind of curious about, and I think it can work, even though it's very nervy, is we got a very cartoon-like figure here and a very believable, almost Art Nouveau kind of style version of a building. I'm kind of fascinated by the conversation between these two. And I want to be very clear to Alex about it. Alex, where are you? Hi.
Right here.
Yeah, I just want to throw something at you. Very often you'll hear me say to somebody, oh, look, your landscape is drawn in such a style and your figure who's sitting there is like a cartoon and they're not really working.
Mm-hmm.
You either have to go all cartoon or all in this other technique, but I'm not always right about that. There are definitely times when mixing styles works great. The trick is to be very, very demanding and ask yourself honestly, is this a playful mix of styles that people are going to want to engage? Or is it a cop-out? In your case, I do believe it's the former, the better of those two options. But I've seen people who are just not comfortable drawing figures yet. So they do really simple, kind of funky cartoons, but they're better at landscape or better at interiors. And so there's a discrepancy. I think in this case, the cartoon itself is very self-assured. It's very designy. It got symmetry going, it's very sure of itself. It doesn't look like I draw cartoons because I can't draw something else. It looks like, you draw cartoons because you can do that also, which is good. So I'm wondering whether these can be mixed. I personally think they can. I want to ask you just some general questions real fast though. Where is this place?
It's Buffalo, New York.
Right, famous for this happening.
Yeah, yeah.
Buffalo wings is the other thing. So are you from Buffalo?
Yeah, I live here.
Where they live? Gotcha. So really love the look of this. I feel like um I don't know what you could come up with that would say Buffalo more to everybody else who doesn't recognize the buildings. But I got to say to everybody here, we're all dealing with that. You know, if it's Paris, it's obvious. You know, New York City, it's obvious. But you get to most places, we're not all going to know the references. But whatever you can find is always helpful. I would like you to take this idea, the direction you're going is really working for me. Take it further though. You know, make
Okay.
it a rich meal. Guys, you ever been at a restaurant where you can't wait to eat and it's like the smallest portion you've ever seen? It was very fashionable in New York to do that. There was some name for it. And it was, oh, it's so elegant. It's so wonderful. You only need 2 bites. You know, those people are going home and cramming cookies in their mouth because they're still hungry. We want a full meal. As gorgeous as it can be, we still want a full meal. If yours feels hungry, your audience is going to be hungry. This is early, so it's not a criticism of Alex. He's in great shape, you know, really. But as he moves forward, I would figure out how to make this, you know, a bigger meal, you know. But right now, I have to say it's a terrific step, very professional and odd, mostly because these are handled one way, or mostly this one, and this one's handled another way. This guy kind of goes particularly well with this building, which is simpler, but I definitely don't want to give this one up. It's like the star of the show. So I want to see what you come up with, both in the way of content and the adventure that you've undertaken regarding style.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Oh yeah, you know, I'm very grateful to this artist for having it say Tokyo right on it, because that is a requirement. And I keep on circling the subject without just reminding everyone. Yes, you must name the place. And if you've taken liberties and done an area like Transylvania, she already put the name there. That's great. So even if you're bending the rules a little bit, you chose an island that's part of a country, not a city. I want the name. So everybody finds some way that you're satisfied with. This kind of works, right? I mean, she's clearly getting all Tokyo about it. It's funky, it's modern, you know, but I don't yet know where it's going to go. I do like the otherworldly aspect of it. This building here is in a dome, right? So this is probably going to be Tokyo of the future, which is one of those cities where you like to imagine the future. So it's rare to see someone do Rome of the future. You know, it's so often in you know, Japan or somewhere else in modern Asia. But I like that, and I even don't mind the incredibly odd perspective, which I want to point out to the artist, Alexandra. Is while I like it, Alexandra, where are you? I see you again. I was showing you Giotto before, Giotto from the Renaissance, and he was mixing perspective with the lack of it, frankly, because he didn't know yet how to do full perspective. But he was such a great artist that everybody still loves the work. Ever since Picasso and up, the whole 20th century at least, here we are in the 21st, modern artists started to do it purposely. I'm mixing perspective with flatness, and there's many, many, many examples of it. So, and I feel like that's what Alexandra's doing, because we're looking at this building at a very specific angle, right? We'd have to be underneath the building or low to be able to see the roof from this angle. We're looking down at the floor here, so we have to be in the sky, but why are we not seeing the roof? And she had this reference, where they were on 2 different angles. So I have to say, Alexander, if you were after thorough realism, you couldn't do that. You'd need all your camera angles to be from the same place. So when you mixed all of them up, it would feel like it. But if you're not after total realism, you're willing to be playful with perspective, I think this works. Not everyone's going to agree, but one of the games to play would be to do more of it. Have perspective, make sure it doesn't make sense the whole time. And then you kind of liberated. You guys see what I'm talking about? We're looking down at the floor, but we're looking up at the building, and it's not a possible perspective. It's got a beautiful dome and a kind of beautiful color on the building. So I'd like to see more of that. I don't have any questions because it's kind of clear what's going on here. And again, I'm okay with people breaking the rules about perspective. Oh, it's fun to see somebody use some tech stuff that we learned last week. We've got text on a path, but also 3D text. Very nicely done. I might want to add. Laura, where are you? I see you. So Laura, I like the way this is looking. Obviously there's so much left to do that I don't have much to say. What little there is very, very solid, rock solid. But there's too little there for me to say very much. Do you have anything you want to say about it? Otherwise, I'm just going to move on. No. So look, make sure you don't go crazy doing the rendering without having your main objects down and your main concept there. You really don't want to draw parts. I'll finish this tree or I'll finish this car and then I'll think about my concept. That doesn't work. You want to get the concept off the ground really early. Your technique's looking great, so I'm not worried about that. I want to see what happens with the concept. Let me just see something here. Oh, that's the end of that. Hey guys, did I skip anybody? No? Anyone? No? Good. So listen, I want to say a closing comment about that. I want to share some new techniques with you that are playful and fairly easy. I think you all have fun doing this stuff that's coming up. But before I do, I want to just sort of encapsulate what we've been talking about. It's one thing for a teacher to teach technique. It's the easiest thing to teach. If I was teaching you color theory, it wouldn't matter to me if we used Paint or Adobe Illustrator, because I could teach it either way. And everyone's teaching the same thing. We all need what you need from color theory. If I was teaching design theories, about arrangement, that's a lot harder, right? But we all know a strong design when you feel it, when you see it. The hardest thing is concept. The hardest thing. And by the way, we're in such a concept-driven moment. When I watch TV now and there's commercials, I'm surprised at how odd the commercials have become. When I was a kid and you're selling cereal, you had a child eating the cereal. And the mom came out, the kid said something cute and funny. Then they had the name of the cereal and on we went. The concepts are getting weirder and weirder. Sometimes you have to see a commercial 5 times before you even know what it was trying to say. My point is, we all have to learn to think conceptually before we output. It's going to be part of your jobs. If you're making games, they're going to talk to you about concepts around the clock. If you're making movies, if you're making animations, if you're advertising, you're selling Apple products, you're selling soup, like none of these things are obvious. It's really about trying to locate playful ideas where 1 + 1 = 3. That's a good concept. But I got to tell you, if 1 + 1 = less than 2, you're in trouble. Because you haven't even satisfied what the expectation. But if it equals 2, all right, you gave everyone what they expected. You achieved the obvious. But listen, don't let me sound cold about this because I don't mean to be. It takes years for most people to find their conceptual momentum, to find their pace. So I'm going to be very open-minded, but at the same time, I'm trying to push everybody to think ideas. What can I say to define this place? What can I do that makes sense, but is still a fantasy to that place? It's really very two-level. How can I define a place? Most of you know New York. What's different about Brooklyn than Manhattan? And you can give me a list of how you feel about Brooklyn, compared to Manhattan. Or we could think of Seattle, right? Which, many of us have not been. But, the microbreweries are there and the hippies are there and people like wearing sandals and it rains a lot. And I have to include all those things if I want to speak about Seattle. Oh, yes, a Seattle person smiling at me. I don't mean to minimize anybody's town, but, that's the way for a moment, the collective unconscious is very strong. Now, in your unconscious, all these stray moments of your childhood, and how you see a certain color because it reminds you of the pool you almost drowned in, so you never wear blue, or why you don't like a certain smell because the person who broke your heart used to wear it as perfume. That's your subconscious. But the collective unconscious is very, very strong. This is why someone's going to create a song today, and next week someone's going to write a song very similar without ever having heard it, because it's springing out of the moment. And that's what we use to talk to each other, the collective unconscious. You know, if I put a mask over my eyes right now, you all know what I'm talking about. You know, people are not willing to wear masks, so they're killing the rest of us. They better start wearing them. They're all walking around with masks over their eyes. They don't see the obvious. And even if I just did a poster like that with a mask over someone's eyes, most of New York City would get it because we're sharing a collective experience. I'm going to use the symbols of that experience to talk. But right now we're back to technique. So I want everybody to join me in Illustrator. So can everybody open up an Illustrator document of any size? This opened from before. It's a very nice drawing. Now, there's 3 techniques I'd like to get to. None of them take very long. They're all playful, useful. Some of you are going to say, I need this now. Others are going to say, you know, I'm not feeling that. I'll wait. And that's fine. The primary techniques of this semester were like the pen tool, the pencil tool, layers, color, gradients. You know, with that little list, you could illustrate. This is on the fringe. All right. I want to start. And by the way, they're loosely laid out on the handout. So we're going to do the fish exercise right now, which is about a certain set of effects, but we need a fish. So I'm going to ask you to join me. You know, I'm going to go with the pencil tool. You might want to do the same. Here's my pencil tool. In fact, I want the pencil tool at its smoothest for a little bit. So I'm actually going to double click the tool and change the option. So I'm going to double click the pencil tool right on the toolbar. And if this, I usually leave the smooth slider here, but I'm going to drag it all the way to the right. You might want to try that with me and click OK. So the pencil tool draws with strokes. So make sure you have some kind of stroke color. I don't really care about the fill just yet. Now what I need is a fish like that corny, simple fish you sometimes see. So I just want a simple body and a simple back fin. That's it. Let's not get crazy with it. Make sure it's closed though, because we're going to be working with fills in a minute. Once you've drawn your fish in one, you know, simple drawing, if you do want to adjust it a little bit, there's 2 things I want to mention. The pencil tool sometimes makes too many anchors. So if you get the white arrow and you want to start fixing it, there's so many anchors that you get weird results. If you ever want to simplify a pencil tool drawing, this is what I want to show you. You could click it once with the white arrow just to see how many anchors there are. This is not so bad, but if you're seeing a lot of anchors, sometimes you want to simplify. So you get the black arrow and click it. And you know, I don't use this much, so I just want to give you a peek at it. This is small. It's just worth seeing. I'm going to go to the object menu. And I'm going to go down to, give me a second here, path. So every drawing you do is a path. You either fill it or stroke it, but they're all a path. So I'm going to path and I'm choosing simplify. And what it does, which is so odd, hang on a second, let me make sure I got that there. Object, path, simplify, there we go. It usually tells you how many points you have, right? If it doesn't, don't worry about it. But if you drag the slider to the left, it's going to reduce the number of anchor points. Sometimes it'll improve the artwork. Sometimes it'll make it worse. But when it improves the artwork, it has the added advantage. There's less anchor points for the white arrow. So I almost always fix things with the white arrow. All right, mine just went down a bunch of points. So I'm going to get my white arrow and click right on the edge. And now I got only these few anchor points. Look how few there are. This one here controls the whole front of the fish. So I could change how round it is rather easily. Oops. Oh, this is acting very weirdly. There we go. Right. This here's got an extra anchor point as far as I'm concerned, but I could still work with it. So anyway, if you want to change your fish quickly, I'd recommend getting the white arrow. Simple's good though. So we literally have 1 minute if you want to make a change. Now what I need next is I need a fill color, right? But I don't want it too light or too dark. Get me something sort of in the middle, right? So I'm going to go with some kind of orange. I'm going to get my swatches out. We know menu swatches. They were out. They were just hiding under Zoom. There we go. And make sure you fill boxes in the front and give it some kind of fill. So again, nothing too dark, nothing too light, right? So anything sort of in the middle is fine. All right, I would like 4 copies of this fish. So get one of your arrow tools and option drag so that we've got a few more. I keep bumping into Zoom tools today. There we go. Simple fish, 4 copies. Could everyone select the top copy? So remember, we're just option dragging. I didn't bother to say that this time because we've done it so much. Option dragging on a Mac or alt dragging on Windows. All right, choose your top fish. It's all about this area here, the effect menu, stylize. Now, these are all pretty cool, right? But I want to do a 3 or 4 that I think are the most valuable. Let's go right to drop shadow. Drop shadow opens up this little window and drops a shadow underneath your fish, underneath your object. This is so commonly used, I really want you to see it. You could do this behind your text if you want to use it for your city, or it could be used behind anything. Notably though, this is a shadow dropped away from the object, like an airplane in the air has a drop shadow, but when it lands, it has a cast shadow. So when you're walking, your shadow starts at your feet, right? That's a cast shadow. The drop shadow is dropped, right? So we just dropped a shadow. I'd like for you to check out a few things. If you move the Y offset, the shadow comes down. Y points down, and it always means that. It's a vertical position. The X offset will move it to the right. By the way, you could use negative numbers to go left. So I'd like you to set it up so that your shadow is pretty far from that fish. So I've got them in the 30s. Now, once you got a distant shadow, that fish is floating, but there's 2 problems with it. If the shadow's that far, it wouldn't be that sharp and it wouldn't be that dark. So a distant shadow should really use blur. So here's blur, and it becomes much more realistic. A distant shadow is also not that dark. So I'm going to lower opacity. And I know I'm going kind of quickly because it's a fairly simple thing. But that fish is floating off the page now, right? So here it is. When we opened it, the mode was set to multiply. We're going to leave it that way. I want to mention we did blending modes in the past, and I said that multiply is the most common and is usually used for shadows. So here's proof. Because if I put it over any color, the shadow color is going to mix with it. And multiply is just great at that. Hang on a second, I turned it off without meaning to. Effect menu, stylize, drop shadow. So I'm going to leave it at multiply, but just give me a second to catch up since I accidentally canceled it. So lots of blur for a distant shadow, low opacity. I'm going to okay this. I want to show you something fast with that though. You don't have to join me. I just want you to see it. If I had a box with another color and I sent it behind that fish, look how great the shadow looks. And that shadow is going to look good even on a gradient, even on a pattern, no matter what I put back there, because multiply is going to mix with the color that's there and create a darkened result. Any questions about drop shadows? I want to show you the next feature from the same menu. So can you please select your next fish? So you're selecting the next fish. We're going back to effect, back to stylize. I want to point out this whole section here is Illustrator effects. The ones we tried for texture were all Photoshop effects, even though we're in Illustrator. So these are native to Illustrator. Stylize. You just try drop shadow. I want you to switch over. Well, no, let's go right to feather. Now, some of you might know feather from Photoshop. And I want to say a quick thing about it. Feather takes the edges of an object and blurs them in a certain way so that they mix with other nearby colors, right? Give me 1 second. I want to double check one quick thing. I want to see if I want to, if this is the one I want. Because there are other options. Yeah, I'm going to go with feather after all. Now, it takes a lot of RAM. So some people turn the preview off, take a good guess at their number, and then turn preview on and see how blurry it is. If your computer's very strong, you could change it with preview on. But if your computer's hanging up on you, uncheck preview, try a different number, and then turn preview back on. I've got so much feathering, no one's even going to see my fish in there, right? So I got a little carried away. I'm going to go back to like 25, and I want to show you something about it. If I had a background behind this one, a second there. I'm going to make it a different color. I'm going to send it to the back. You see how blurry that is? So I just want to say something real quickly about feathering. Don't get carried away with it. You know, young artists use it to fake stuff. They don't like an edge. They don't like the drawing that much. It's the equivalent of taking a soft brush and going like this to your oil paint. Yeah, I would say feathering for things that really look feathered in nature, like clouds. You know, you can make a pretty decent cloud with this feature, right? Other than that, I wouldn't get crazy with it. I want to go on to your next fish. So here we are on the next fish. I want to go back to the same set, effect menu, stylize. I want to talk to you about inner glow for a minute. Inner glow is okay, but I prefer outer glow. Sorry. Inner glow is okay, but I actually want inner shadow. No, but there is no inner shadow. So we're going to use inner glow the natural way, and then we're going to use it with a cheat to force it to be an inner shadow. Right now, try inner glow. And at first, you could barely see it. It's just a thin glow inside your stroke. So you might want to take the blur up a whole bunch. Now, this is not blurred, and I can prove it to you. Right? It just has an inner glow. And if I was going to do this, I might take the stroke off of it so I could really appreciate that fish is glowing. I'm going to need my appearance palette. I'm going to be pushing it on you soon. But why do I need mine? Well, I already closed the effect. So the only way you could alter any of these effects once you've closed it is by using the appearance palette. So, you know, if you want to drag your appearance palette out now, go right ahead. That's okay. Because all I'm going to do is take a look. It says inner glow here, so I could edit it. And I'm back where you are. I want to point something out about inner glow that's just useful to this conversation. You remember how before I said multiply is a blending mode often used to make things darker? So people like shadows, because shadows darken things when you cast a shadow. The opposite is screen. Screen always makes things lighter. It wouldn't like it if you used black because it wouldn't know what to do. So screen asks you to choose a light color. The default here happens to be white. But if I did switch it, if I clicked on that white box, I could create a different inner glow as long as I don't go choosing a dark color. I don't know if you could see it. I sure hope you can. My fish has got yellow going around the outside. You know, it kind of makes you wonder if some of the stuff we did before with gradients could have been done like this. Some of the stuff, you know, because it's following the contour. That glow is the actual shape of the fish. All right. So anyway, you would leave this on screen and choose a very light color. Could everyone click OK? You know, we may need 2 more fish. So could you copy your last one? Option drag that last one. We may need 2. I want to show you a sheet that I really love. Someone showed this to me years ago. Inner shadows are very useful because it's just a quick way to make an object feel very dimensional. Cartoonists use this sometimes because their drawings are very simple, right? And sometimes they just want Charlie Brown to feel a little 3D. So they'll take his head and they'll just make the head part a little rounder. Here's one way to do it. I'd like you to click on one of your unused fish. I'm going to zoom in a bit. Moving this guy over. I'm talking about this one. And I'd like you to go to the effect menu, back to stylize. Now this time we're going to use inner glow, but we're going to hack into it. We're going to break it because we don't want an inner glow. We want to make it an inner shadow. So we're going to cheat. Could you take inner glow, click it, and we need to make 2 changes. We need to go to mode and say, look, don't screen because I actually want it to be darker. Please use multiply. So I want you to change the mode to multiply. Now multiply needs a dark color to work with. So then I'm going to click the chip and I'm going to pick any dark color that I want to use. I have inner shadow. What I love about this is I have so much freedom with how I shade that object. Maybe I don't want something blackish, maybe I want something, more reddish. But it does need to be kind of dark. So let's see how that works. Not bad. You also have the opacity if you want to reduce it a little bit. You can just back up. And you have blur if you want to spread it out some more. It's a little easier to see at a high opacity, so let me crank that up. Here's a lot of blur. Less blur. Here's less blur with less opacity. In other words, it's kind of transparent. It's lighter. I love this. I'm a little surprised that Adobe has not created an inner shadow filter. They have inner glow, but I like inner shadow and I've used it fairly often. How is everybody so far, right? You could do this on text. You could do this on so many cool things, right? I want to just double check because I feel like I left one out. I'm going to take a look at my own handout for a minute. Drop shadow, inner glow, outer glow I don't really care much about. By now you got the pattern. I want to take a peek here just to check one last thing. Now those are all the good ones I just shared with you, really. Yeah, outer glow indeed would make the fish glow. I just want to add one last thing. If you add multiple filters, multiple effects to the same object, they don't always work. Sometimes you get 2 effects that fight with each other and they just refuse to work. So I wanna, the other day I couldn't get inner shadow to work with a drop shadow. I'm gonna see if it happens today. Here's mine with the inner shadow. I'm gonna go back and try to add the drop shadow. And today it worked fine. So that's good. I'm gonna keep it. I like it.
It looks just like a goldfish.
I know, and I rehearse these things, so I don't really make them up. I know in advance exactly what I'm going to do. I get surprised now and then. I actually like the fish so much, I took it into an animation program and made it swim because it was just too much fun. I want to point out, though, even a more elaborate fish with scales and the rest of it, we could have run this on. And then you'd have to decide, do I want just the body of the fish to have the effect with scales on top of it? Or do I want them all to have the effect? And it's hit or miss to see what looks best. I do want everyone to choose a fish, though, and get the appearance palette out. So the appearance palette is under the window menu. And it really helps if you use effects a lot. Because down here, it's showing me this fish has 2 different effects, inner glow and drop shadow. So if I click either one, I could change it in any way that I want. I just gave him a greenish shadow on the inside and I okay it. And if I want to work on the other one, I'll just click that one once and I can make whatever change I want on that one. Now it's got a reddish cast shadow. Yeah, and just click OK. The appearance palette's very helpful when you start getting involved with advanced options. Does anybody have any question about effect stylize? So listen, I want to move on to something else then, but I want to say, you know, sometimes you'll use these, sometimes you won't. It is so much to do with what you come up with after this semester when you're the owner of all this, you know, when you're figuring out what you want out of Illustrator. We're all going to do things very, very differently, but these are kind of interesting. I want to show you something else though. So let's get a quick look at my handout first. I want to talk to you a little bit about these features that are all distort features. And the term here that looks like envelope is really, you should think of it as envelop. You know, if you hug somebody in a big way, you're enveloping their whole body in that hug. You know, if you're walking out, can you hang on a second? I apologize. I shouldn't be teaching next to the door, is what it is. I'm coming. Who is it? Oh, thank you so much. Thank you very, very much. You know, the truth of it is, I live in Brooklyn and you cannot leave your packages outside the door. They're not going to stay there. You know, so nowadays, anytime someone knocks, I got to go. What did I do before COVID? I don't know. All right. So about envelope distortion, you're going to wrap things and distort them. This is pretty interesting. Could everybody join me by going into Illustrator? Could you open up a whole new page? So file menu new or just Command N. Same size is fine. Now this time I need something simple. I want you to join me exactly though. I'd like you to get the rectangle tool and choose a fill color, right? Any fill color is fine. I want you to make a rectangle, something like that, about that size. And stroke or not, either which way. But I want you to option drag that rectangle so that you've got, say, 4 of them. Now I'm going to need to do 3 or 4 different exercises involving those. Let's just call them stripes, right? So I need 4 sets. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my black arrow and select all 4. And I think I might need to make mine a little bit smaller. But then I'm going to option drag a separate set far enough away that I could get it easily. 3rd set. And I'm going to put a 4th set somewhere. I think I'm going to need it. All right. Envelope distortion means you're taking something that exists and distorting it to fill a different kind of shape. A flag is a flat rectangle, but you almost never see it flat, right? It always waves. That's an envelope distortion. I want to show you one method right now. We're going to use a shape on top to distort the stripes. So what I want next is the oval tool. I keep forgetting this program calls it ellipse, the ellipse tool. It hides underneath the rectangle. I would like you to draw an ellipse about that big. The color doesn't matter. And to be honest, it's pretty generous. It would probably let you use other sizes just fine. What we're going to do is we're going to tell those stripes to fill that circle, but not like a mask, in a different way. And I want to show you how this is going to work. The shape on top is the final shape. So we're looking for a circle. Can you get your black arrow, select the stripes and the circle, that whole stack, and then I'd like you to join me in a new location completely. We're moving to the object menu this time. The object menu has got a whole section devoted to this subject called envelope distort or envelop distort. And there are these 3 I'd like to try today, but this is make with top object. So it's object menu, envelope distort, make with top object. Pretty crazy. You know, I don't use it often, I'll admit, but I've seen it in a lot of corny graphic design, with the word sale inside of some cool shape, you know. So I don't really have a lot of use for this one, but it is kind of cool. So I wanted to mention it. There are several other ways, though, to distort your content. So what I'd like you to do next is select the next pile that you made. Guys, I'm sorry to back up, but we could have used our fish, tried to put stripes on the fish that way. You know what I mean? Because all it's really doing is looking at the top edge and the bottom edge and figuring out how to distort it if it's closer to one edge or the other. So it creates the kind of curve that imitates your object. Kind of interesting idea. But now we're on a different method. You selected the next 4 stripes. If you haven't, please do it now. And we want to go back to the same menu, object, envelope distort. But this is called make with mesh. When you click make with mesh, it asks you how many rows and how many columns you want. I want to make mine bigger, so give me a second so everybody could see what I'm doing. Object, envelope distort, make with mesh. This says 4 by 4. Click preview to see what that looks like. So it's got 4 rows. The rows are horizontal, 1, 2, 3, 4. If I thought I wanted more, it would look like this, right? So it's not about the stripes. It's this mesh, this grid. I want to go back to 4 though. I might make it simpler. There's only 3. Now, what do these even mean? Set yours to 4 by 4. And what we're going to do is we're going to click OK. Those little dots on that grid can be moved with the white arrow to produce amazing effects. So we're working with a 4 by 4 mesh. Click OK. Switch to the white arrow. Now I'd like you to take any of these little points you see and drag it. So what I'm going to do, I just took this second one over. I'm going to skip this one and do it here, because you'll start seeing the pattern of what I'm doing. I'm on the next row, and look, it's starting to distort both stripes. So I'm getting a wave pattern right now by manually choosing which anchors I move. And if I needed more control, they even have handles so that you could, make steeper curves for really elaborate effects. But at first, the thing that interests me most is really just moving the anchors. And they'll all have some kind of effect. I'm creating a real mess out of this thing.
Professor,
Yes.
is this the effect you were mentioning earlier when you said that might help with the perspective?
This whole set, yes.
Okay.
Now, I wasn't really sure, and I wasn't sure which one, but quite possibly this one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Glad you asked. So the thing about this, it's easy to get crazy. I'm Command Zing, right? It's definitely better when you kind of know what you're after, right? And you want custom control. Pretty powerful stuff. I'm getting a kind of flag waving effect. There are other ways to get a flag waving effect, but I do like a lot about this one, really, I do. Because, I could go back and put the right gradients in here. It's going to be very convincing, right? And I could decide how much wind there is, for one, right? So that didn't involve an upper shape at all. It just used a mesh. White arrow only. I want to show you the next set. Let's go down to the next set. Select those stripes. All right, so I'm just dragging over them with the black arrow. I'm going to the same place, object, envelope, distort. And this is called make with warp. I saved it for last because it's the easiest. But it may not be the easiest to be exact with, but let's find out. Make with warp. So make with warp has a bunch of styles to get you started. Arc, arc lower. I'd like you to zip through a bunch of these, see what they feel like. It's interesting that arc and arch are different. Bulge. So like all of these things could have been done with one of the envelope features, one of the others, but these are really kind of believable shortcuts. Some of them are very peculiar, these shells. Here's a flag, a very specific flag, not the one that I drew. But I want to point out, though, that once you find one that interests you, and they're all valuable, I'm going to flag right now just to make my point. They each have controls that you can use, and they also have the same points like the mesh had. But here you get a head start. In other words, this is how much bend there is. So this is like a load of it, right? The whole thing's completely distorted, right? Here's some very subtle bend. Not really that subtle, is it? I could start working with these two then to see if I could make it more subtle. A little differently to take some play, get me a very cool three-dimensional effect that I didn't expect, right? And that's why I really believe in playing. A lot of these things, logic gets you to the door, but it's your intuition that takes you through the door. But once I click OK, and this is something that I didn't used to know, I could also get the wide arrow. And I'll see it made a mesh of its own, a very simple one, but it's there. If I click one of those anchors, I could actually alter it. That's kind of interesting. Brings it to a different level of control that I don't think this tool used to have. Again, that would be the wide arrow for that last step. Odd stuff. I want to take a quick look at something here. Give me a minute. All right, those are the 3 envelope distortions that I wanted to share with you. I want to look at my handout to see how much time I have, because there is something I'd like to include. I want to get a quick look, if possible, to see how any of these would work with text. I'm just going to move some stuff over. And
I have a
listen,
quick
honestly,
question.
oh yes, please do.
So how would you go back to like having it ungrouped and having the single stripes on their own, like get rid of the mesh, but keeping the
Excellent
distortion?
question. Excellent question. To completely undo it, right? Take the black arrow and click on one. And by the way, Sam, I like the way you're using the professional language. He said, undo the group. So you totally recognize that they've been grouped automatically, which I should have mentioned, but you did, so thank you. That's a headache. So if you don't want them grouped and you don't want the effect at all, check this out. So pick one, go to the object menu, back to envelope distort, and notice it says release. And it had its own masking object, strangely, which I could get and throw out. And here I am, I'm back. Does that help?
Yes. Is there a way to keep the like the
Keep the
messed
effect?
up stripes, but have them like say I just wanted like to expand it and like
That's an interesting question. You really do have the language down, Sam. I got to tell you. I want to Command Z again. Give me a second. All right, so this is where I was. I'm going to go to the object menu to envelope distort, and it has expand here. Most of you have not heard of expand before. I want to make sure it works before I venture to describe it. So I think this is what you were after. What expand does is it takes the current effect, but it's no longer live. It redraws the object as though you drew it that way from scratch. So it doesn't have to be a group anymore. You don't have to worry about the appearance palette or the effect menu. It's just like you drew it that way. So I'm curious to see if it's still a group. And it is, but if I don't like that, I'd go to the object menu and say ungroup. So right now, these are actually separate objects. So I could do whatever I want with them based on that earlier effect, which is pretty cool. I want to repeat that because it turned out to be more interesting and had not planned it. The way to keep this without having to fuss with effects anymore is to go to the object menu, envelope distort, and say expand. It's a funny kind of word, but it works for many special effects in Illustrator, where it turns everything into plain old anchor points, plain old objects, but it still looks the same. This here, of course, is still a group. So if you didn't want it to be a group, you'd select it, object menu, ungroup. But I don't know. I think in many cases, you probably would want to keep it as a group because it's still easy to work with in for so many things that you might want to do once it's expanded. Good questions. Listen, I want to decide now, since we have till 6. I want to give you a quick look to see how this would behave with text, since I know everyone has to put the name of their place on this project, and I don't know how you want it. You should do it in a way that you really like. So even if it's simple, like a label, the right font, the right color, but maybe it's on a sign or on a flag or on an object, in which case there are too many options to discuss. But the question that always comes up for me is, do I need to create outlines or not? So I want to mention something fast. Some of you are going to hate me for going this fast on something, but this is a review and we don't have time for it in a big way. But some people take a word and they create outlines, which is kind of like expand for words. And this way, each letter becomes a drawing. And they do that because they want to mess with it. Thing is, do I need to do that just to use filters or just to use distort? That's the question. So I want to show you two things. One is this, and I'll ask you to join me once I'm clear what I want you to do, but I just want to point something out. So here I got a word, and it's large, and I'm looking for a handy font, right? This is this nice cartoony font, but I can't change the shape of the letters. If I wanted to change the shape of the letters, I'm making a copy just in case I want this one. But if I wanted to change the shape of the letters, I have to do this. Type menu, create outlines. Now I want to show you what happened there with a lighter color so it's easier for you to see. They have anchor points. So once I do create outlines, there's a few cool things. One, well, I could do that. Two, I could reshape paths as though I drew the letters myself to begin with. Right? Well, that's pretty cool. That's all because I took a word and I did type create outlines. And like most advanced things, it only behaves with the white arrow. Now, I didn't even intend to talk about that. The only reason I bring it up is some filters will only work on drawings. Others will work on drawings and text. If you ever need it on text and it just will not work, use create outlines. Computer doesn't know their words anymore, and you could do anything with them. All right, but I do want to try something quickly. And if you'd like to join me, we're just going to have to make this one simple. Let me get rid of some stuff. I'd like you to type a word. So I'm going to start from scratch here. Get the type tool and do not make a box. It's going to do that. That's for articles and stories. You just want a word. So take the type tool and click. Type your word. To make it larger, I would recommend the black arrow while holding down Shift. Don't forget Shift because you're going to get distorted letters if you don't. So hold down Shift while you do it. I'd like you to get yourself a bold font. And the fastest way to all those choices is Command T or Control T on Windows so that you can get this out. I think of it as type. Truly, the palette's called character. But if you think of it as type, you'll remember the shortcut, Command T. So find yourself a font, and something bold would probably be a good idea. Let's do a quick experiment to see if any of the envelope distortions will work on that word. So I think I'm going to try mesh. Object, envelope distort, make with mesh. It's offering me 4x4. That's fine. Now I'm going to get my white arrow and click an anchor and move it. Well, what do you know? So I have to say, if I was doing text underwater, I'd probably want to set some text up with a mesh. You could easily see how I could make this start to look underwatery. Well, we just learned that at least one envelope distortion doesn't need create outlines. It worked live. So Illustrator gets better every single version of what it lets you do with text. When I started this, I don't think you were allowed to do that. I had to convert it into a drawing. So far, I don't have very long, but I have one thing that's just fun to not do. This is a tool that some of you are going to know what to do with. Some of you are going to be so much better than me. So I want to show you the tool so that can happen, right? And I call this the bread exercise, right? So check this out. Could everybody join me by opening a new page? One more page, Command N. Now here's our mission. We're going to draw a quick slice of bread, and we're going to use that slice to create a loaf, right? So it's a very odd tool that's used very often for 3D effects. So here's the way I'm going to suggest it. Could everybody get the rectangle tool? And let's start with a plain old rectangle. This is going to be most of that first slice. Now, I want to mention a little detail that you've all bumped into, but I've never discussed even once, and I probably should have. Those tiny circles that show up, these little things, all they do is round out corners. I don't use it much, but it's sure going to help me with my bread. So all I'm saying is, draw your rectangle. If you want them rounded, take those little circles and just pull them in. I'd like you to fill this with some, actually, let's not even fill it yet. I want you to get another shape. I want to top it with an oval. So I'm getting my ellipse tool. And all I really want to do is overlap that something like this. So I don't know if you could see it, but I'm going to merge these to make it feel like a slice of bread. I'm playing with it a little bit, and I'm imagining what this is going to look like as one shape. We could have drawn it with the pen tool, right? But I don't really have time for that. We need the Pathfinder though. Could everyone go to the window menu and open up Pathfinders? I want you to join these two shapes. Now we've done this a bunch of times by now, right? We're only going to need this button, this first one, but I have to select both the shapes first. I'm going to unite them. Nice slice of bread, and I want to go pick a color for it. So I'm going to pick a fairly light color. Gee, no one likes green bread though. So I'm finding myself a fill color. And I want it to be not too dark. You'll see why soon. All right. Once you got a reasonable slice of bread, a closed shape for bread, I want you to make a copy of it because we're going to use it as the other end of the loaf. So I'm getting my black arrow and I'm option dragging another slice. If I'm going to want some perspective, I might make this one a little bit bigger. Now, before we see the 3D come to life, I want to do two things. I want to make sure both slices of bread are a slightly different color and that neither one has a stroke. So I'm going to choose this one, and I'd like the color to be lighter. So what I'm going to do is go to my color palette and see what I have available. And if I move any of these sliders to the left, they're going to help me make it lighter. Because they're going to have less of each color. I also want you to take the stroke off. So you select an object, bring the stroke box in front and turn it off. Do the same thing to the other slice. Bring the stroke box in front and choose color of none. Now we're about to tell that bread to extrude. Now extrude is a 3D word that means take something flat and pull it out into space. Woo, right? And you are probably going to want strokes, but I want you to see what it looks like without them so we can make smart choices about the stroke. What you need to join me at this stage is just those two slices with no strokes and different colors. For the record, I'm making my one in the back darker, so it's going to help me create a more believable space when it gets dimensional. So however you want to do it, just make sure that they're different tones. I'm sticking with the one in front light, the one in back a little dark. All right, I want to show you guys something, right? First, I want to show you the options for the blend tool. The star of the show now is the blend tool. I want you to see the options even before we use them. All right, could you come onto your toolbar and locate this tool? Or you could press W to find it. So if you're in the wrong tool, just tap W. This is it. I'd like you to double click that tool though, the blend tool. So W will take you there, the letter W, but I'm going to double click it. I want to point out that there's a spacing option by default set to smooth color. We may have to come back and change these later, but I just want you to know what the default is. It's called smooth. So we don't actually need this, just cancel. You'll see what it does in a minute. All right, do you have the blend tool selected? All you have to do is click the two objects. So here I go. I got my blend tool, I click one, click the other. Now, if I deselect it, this is what I got. It's almost a slice of bread, but not quite. So I want to Command Z it. You don't have to, I just want to make my point. All we did was take the blend tool, click an object, click another one. Now I'm ready to take action and see if I can improve it. Well, you know, I would like a little definition so it doesn't completely blur, you know, and there's a number of ways I could do it. One of the ways I could do it, though, is see what a stroke might do. And it so happens bread often does have a stroke around it called the crust. So I want to see if I could use the crust to make this better. I'm going to get my white arrow and deselect. With the white arrow, please select the front end of bread. There are only two slices still. Even if I move one, you'll see it does bizarre things as the rest follow it. But I could select the back one or the front one with one click. I'm going to take the front one and bring the stroke box in front. And I want to get a dark bready color. All right, it's a start, but not quite right. I think what I want to do is make the stroke thicker and see how that blends. So I'm going to need my stroke palette. All you did was select the front slice, bring the stroke box in front. So I'm going to Command Z it. I took the white arrow to select the front slice. I got my stroke box in front and I picked the color. Let's get the stroke palette out though. Window menu, stroke. I could have done this from other places, but this is home for strokes. I'm going to raise the stroke weight. And right now I'm noticing how the front slice looks so much better, but I'm not so sure about the rest. It has helped, so I'm going to leave it. It's possible that the back slice wants a different stroke. If it's a lighter slice of bread, it might have a lighter stroke. If it's a darker slice, it might have a darker stroke. So what I'm going to do is find out. I just bring the white arrow over it and it'll show me very quickly that I'm selecting it if I click. So I'm going to choose a color for that. It depends what you want. This bread looks like it's been in the oven a little too long, but I like the look of it. Either stroke can have its weight controlled to affect the blend. This one is the way I want it. There's my loaf of bread. So I want to just recap what matters. This is not really baking class, you know, but the bread just happened to be convenient. The two slices made the point. I could do this with any two shapes, but once you figure out what your goal is, you might want to start playing with strokes then. So have a look. I'm going to ask you not to join me on this one because I got one more thing I would like you to see, but I just want to point it out. Here's a circle, right? And this one's going to have this color fill and no stroke. But this time I got a completely different shape with a completely different fill and also no stroke. Click, click, right? The one thing that I keep on realizing is I always want something to define the front. You know, it just gets lost in there, as cool as it is. Are there any other tricks to define the front, make it stand out a little? Well, I could have copied the front shape before, saved it and done something with it, popped it on top like a cap. But I think I could do that now. I'm going to get my white arrow and see if it lets me. I'm clicking this shape and I'm option dragging a copy. The reason I use the white arrow, that's not working. It's continuing the blend. So let me Command Z. Oops, went too far. I guess I take the white arrow, click it, Command C, and then Command V somewhere. Right, so this way it's free. Option dragging continued the blend, that didn't work. But what I could do with a copy is any number of things. I could give that one a stroke by itself, for example, and return it. Or I could, remember, I just made a copy. I could take that stroke off and just give this one a slightly different color than the rest of it. You know, and return that. So the idea is I want it to be believable, but because this one's a fake, right, it won't blend. So again, if anyone likes that idea, I usually try to make a copy when I start. But if you forget, click the front with the white arrow, Command C, and use Command V to paste it randomly, and then do whatever you want with it. Listen, I do have one more thing I want to show you that might be a little more useful. It is also the blend tool. I have to confess about this tool. I've loved this tool since the first time I tried it, but I've only used it once in a professional project. Strangely, I needed a rhinoceros horn, and there were many ways I could have done it, but as it turned out, I got the best horn by using the blend tool. You know, I made a very narrow horn and smaller, and I used the two colors, and it's perfect. But really, I don't use it very often. But it's people who like that 3D effect more than I do that get to master it. I want to share with you a common trick. I'm going to leave the bread there, but I'm going to delete everything else. So here's the bread. It is a group. By the way, Sam, I could probably expand this. You know, I'm not sure why I would. It might leave a very complicated set of shapes, but I'm going to leave it off. I want to show you what we could do with a word. Did everyone get the type tool? Click once and type a word. I'm going to type bread. So just click once, type bread. I'd like to get your black arrow and make it big. I'm holding down Shift to help. I want a big word. Doesn't have to say bread. The character palette, which I keep calling the type palette, right, is what you want because you're going to want to change that font. Command T was the fast way to get it, only because this is the slow way. Window menu, type, character. That's just too far away. I need this tool all the time. So I use Command T. I'd like you to choose a nice bold font because we're going to make it three-dimensional. I want to follow basically the same rules as the bread. So I'm going to pick a color for this. And I'm going to make that color a little darker. It's going to go back in space. I'm going to option drag to copy that word. And I'm going to make it bigger. And I'm going to give it a lighter color. I'm going to turn off strokes for both. By the way, I always start text without strokes. Small words always look bad with a stroke anyway. These are big words, so I could have gotten away with it. But I stick with that basic rule. Get the fill right, deal with strokes later if you need them. Okay, the weird thing is the blend tool is currently set to smooth. And so the bread was so smooth, but it isn't going to work for some reason with text. It only gave me one word in the middle. So we need a different way. So this is what I'd like you to do. Could everyone double click the blend tool? We want to look at those options again. So go right to the toolbar. Remember, it was W that got you to that tool, but double click it. Smooth color, for whatever reason, didn't work with the word bread. It might have worked if we did create outlines, but I'd rather not. So we have a choice. How many steps in between? Because that's really what's going on. It's making like little copies in between. But I think I'm going to go with specified distance. So I'm going to say all the copies that imitate a blend, they look like a blend. If I make them super close, they should look blended. So I'm going to try 2 points instead of 4. Very, very close. I'm going to click OK. Now, anything I use this tool on is going to follow that instruction. I'm going to click the first, click the back, and 2 points work great. So I want to repeat that. I can tell I have a little more work to do, but I do want to repeat it one more time. If anything you draw misbehaves with the default option of smooth, come back and try it with a different option. We're exploring distance. Small numbers. So, essentially, it's creating a number of steps in between. And if I said 10 steps, maybe that wouldn't be enough to look smooth. So instead, I'm doing distance and saying stay very close. You still have to use the tool. Click one, click the other. This technique is very popular, but I clearly need some kind of definition. I could try it with strokes, but I don't think I want any. So what I'm going to do instead, like I did with the bread, is I'm going to find a way to copy the first word separately, do what I want with it, and then drop it there like a cap. So I'm going to get my white arrow, deselect, and select only the front. I'm going to do Command C like I always do when I copy, and Command V for a plain old paste. This one, well, I could give it a different color or a stroke of its own. It isn't going to blend anyway, so I could do whatever I want. Don't you see this all over the place? It's a very common technique. I could get the white arrow and change the perspective in any number of ways. Very subtle or dramatic. If I want to change the front, I just have to move my little fake cap there first. And then I can move the front wherever I want too. Now, guys, we have a couple of minutes. Does anyone have a question for me about the blend tool? If you bump into a question after today, write it down or let me know and I'll be glad to do my best to answer it. But I do want to say a couple things about this tool and why I'm doing it at the end of the class. There's a certain set of tools that are rare. They're more common if you're in certain industries. Kids love this stuff. If you're working for Highlight Magazine, you might do this feature. Cereal for kids, shampoos for kids. It's a kid looking thing. but you might find other mature things to do with it. And so I wanted to mention it. I do it at the end because it's not the heart of Illustrator. We've been focusing on the heart. Now we are on the outside. So I just want to tie it up. We used Blend to make a loaf of bread, and we also used it for some 3D text that says bread. We tried all kinds of effects to create shapes, and we also did all kinds of effects to create stylized effects. You know, these things, of course, were made to mix. Don't like the colors, but you got the point. All right, folks, I just want to get a quick look at the handout before people start taking off.
Professor,
Yes.
can you please clarify what we were doing for next class? Like you said, we were breaking out. Sorry, you said we were breaking out into groups.
Is that a bird?
Yeah, that was one of my birds.
Oh, no. Here's the deal with next class.
Okay.
I want everyone to bring in a copy far beyond the copy that I saw today. You know, really, the only one I saw that looked, if I wasn't going to push her harder, the Transylvania one was pretty cooked. But I'm even going to ask that artist to see what more they can do. Most of them were at a healthy level of development. A few of them were completely undeveloped. So those people have to find time to catch up. I don't grade the draft, so it's not a disaster. But next class, we're going to work together so that what's going to happen is I'm going to find some way to talk to you as individuals. I don't know if I'm going to do it in front and just say, hey, Juliana, let's look at yours. The main reason I don't want to go there is I don't really want to do just another critique. I want people working, you know, where they have a chance to talk to me. So I'm going to be thinking it through the next days, how I want to do this in Zoom, because this is one thing I've not done in Zoom before. You know, typically I say week 14, everyone come in prepared to work. That's what I'm saying to you now. Come in with something very developed, come in prepared to work on it. You have 3 free hours to work, right? What I'm going to do is find some way to talk to people, and it may be very casual. It may be me working alongside and just saying, anytime anyone has a question, please let me know. It might be that casual. So think of it as an assisted lab. I'm here to assist. The lab is a place for us to work together in each other's company, right? I may call people out separately, but I've not figured that out just yet. Glad you asked. All right. So everybody, I do want you to submit the work. Please read the box to be sure you didn't forget anything. A lot of you have not yet used text. You have to name the place as part of the illustration. All of the samples that I offered did that. I think a lot of you are going to do it much better, to be honest. Anyway, are there any last questions? I'm happy to answer them. So folks, then I want to wish you all luck. I like what I saw today. There's room for improvement. There's 2 weeks before it's finally due. So I'm not at all worried. And I hope no one else here is. If you are feeling behind though, you know, figure out what strategy you need to catch up. I will see you all next week. More casually, no new material intended. Really just for me to be helpful to see how we could push this as far as we can. All right. Folks, it's been my pleasure. I'm going to say goodbye now. Signing off. See you all next Monday. Unless there's a question. I keep asking, but, you know, feels weird after a while. Thank you for asking. All right, I'll see you all next week.
Thank you,
Bye, guys.
Professor. Have a great week.
Have a great week.
Good luck with your other classes. Right? They're not as important as mine, but they're important. All right. See you. Hey, Laura, are you sticking around for, did you have a question for me?
I was gonna ask you something, but I think I'm gonna keep it.
Why?
Cause I don't know. For the city, I have mine really undeveloped, and I thought to